everybody. I want to welcome you to a new edition, the next new edition of the Deepwatch Overwatch podcast. Today we've moved to a virtual setting just to make sure that we can get as many people involved and get the right folks in front of you to talk about some of the things that have been going on. We'll be discussing a couple of different topics today, and I'll let my cast of crew introduce themselves.
So hi, everybody. I'm Bill Bernard. I'm Vice President of Security and Content Strategy. That's the title this week. Been here with Deepwatch for almost 6 years, so glad to be on today.
Yeah, John Stockel, the EVP of Global Security Operations and Strategy. Been with Deepwatch really since it's been out at GuidePoint Security. So started on the strategy and finance side and transitioned into operations, running all of our customer-facing operations teams, so about 200 plus folks across engineering and our SOC.
Hey folks, Trey Ford. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer here at Deepwatch. I oversee the security, the IT organizations, and work closely with our CISO community.
And for those of you who don't remember me or recognize me, again, my name is Neil Humphrey. I am the VP of Market Strategy over here at Deepwatch. So on that point, let's get to the topics we want to hit on today. Like it's post-RSA, I'd say it's been fairly busy as it pertains to actually preceding RSA, actually, and then moving into just post-RSA. It's been pretty busy in the SIEM marketplace, and we've seen, I would want to call it a bit of an unexpected scrambling of technologies and partnerships and, frankly, marriages or combinations. I mean, Trey, I'll throw that over to you first. Like, what did we expect to see, or from a CISO chair, did you expect to see some of the activity around like the Exabeam and the logarithm components, or certainly the QRadar and the Palo Alto side?
Look, I think the consolidation makes sense, and with the volatility in the market, we're going to see a lot more. I think from the CISO chair, what makes the most sense is as all of us are being asked to do a ZBB, a zero basis budget review, not all of our CISOs are business people. And so when we talk to people like Stockel, folks that are fluent in the language of finance, we have to explain line by line why we're spending, while we're spending. And some of these consolidation opportunities made a lot of sense. Some of us have a hard time justifying all these things, or are asked to make impossible trade-offs as we renew and reevaluate the spend. And so that's impacting performance for a lot of organizations, and it's opening the door for a lot of, I hate to use the word synergy, but synergistic integrations. I think, we'll talk more about the competitive moat and some of the other aspects, market dynamics, but I think this makes sense. I think it's a net positive for everyone involved.
John?
Doesn't surprise me at all. I think, given the catalyst that we're seeing in a lot of AI strategies at a lot of different cyber companies, we recognize that data aggregation, data analysis is really, the keys to the kingdom to actually showing, a real efficacy in your AI strategy, right? So the interest in SIEM and really what that brings to the table to your product portfolio, which is, hey, I have an ability to, not only port in data, but also run queries and analysis at scale across a very complex environment, is the crux of what the AI problem is trying to solve in security. So I think the interest there, both in private equity as well as through some of these larger M&A deals that we're seeing, makes a lot of sense. The SIEM market remains obviously very heavily weighted towards a few large players and then a long tail of a lot of smaller firms that I think have struggled to gain the same level of traction and market penetration as someone like Splunk and as IBM's QRadar and even Microsoft, right? So I think acquisitions of these smaller companies is a ripe opportunity for a lot of these larger players, as well as tech companies that are looking to acquire some of the great technologies these companies have built.
Well, just to throw some numbers out there, like just from our research and from what we've seen from some of our analysts, friends, and other folks, right? I mean, I think you mentioned something kind of key is the market from a SIEM perspective has really kind of been divided around 6 different entities, more so than anything else from a major SIEM kind of flag holder standpoint. And the last 6 months have really impacted, I think the number is like 72% of the entirety of the market. So we think of something like say, for example, Logarithm as being a big play, and they are a major player in the SIEM marketplace, but I want to say they were down around 3% of overall market share. So the Logarithm and Exabeam was kind of around that same number. So you've seen a combined 6% perspective. And I don't believe we've heard, kind of the intricacies of who got who or who's running who. I think we're all very interested to see what that space or that marriage would look like moving forward. Bill, I mean, anything that you can think of that would, like, between Log or, say, for example, Exabeam, we're talking about like QRadar components?
Well, I mean, I think the writing is on the wall pretty clearly that QRadar got purchased by Palo Alto in order to convert the customer base over to Palo Alto. There's been no secret made of that. Palo Alto has effectively announced that. So in essence, they bought a customer base. And I think this whole thing is, in some ways, we've been watching this happen for years now with a lot of the other, I'll call them the point solutions of security, the EDR solutions, the firewall solutions, the this, the that, the other, the VPN style solutions. And now we're finally seeing it at, I'd call it the analysis layer, right? Because it was all the, get the Palo Alto suite of products for your endpoint and your firewalls and things along those lines. And now it's, wait, we need the analysis layer, right? They actually started with Demisto a while back, so we kind of knew where they were going some time ago. What impresses me is we're really talking about 5 players that were 72% of the market, right? Cisco buying Splunk and finishing that up, that was 50 some odd percent. And then the other 4 that have transacted represent 20 some odd percent. That's the thing that amazes me. It's that few players were so much of this market. And now that's how we get to, Neil, your stat about 72% of those players. So it really, it remains to be seen, but I really do expect the Devos and the others that are still out there, we're going to hear about them getting closer and closer and closer to somebody's stack and becoming part of somebody's stack. Or who knows, one of them might get the financing to buy the other tooling to make themselves the stack. That would be interesting to see too. I see a huge need for this, honestly, less in the enterprise space, because, when you think about that small to medium company, or small to medium enterprises, we're now starting to call them, they're the ones who really suffered from the tool sprawl the most. 20 tools for them was like 150 tools for a Fortune 500, that they just can't get the people to manage those tools. And so this consolidation is something the market really wants. The thing that I find extra interesting about that one, Neil, is according to some Gartner numbers, only about 29% of companies expect that this tool consolidation is going to save them any money, which is really interesting to me as well.
And that's a really good point, but I think it takes us down 2 separate paths. And I'm going to throw this back to Trey and John on this one, because I really do want to hear your both of your opinions on this one. And please, I hope you're going to tell me that I'm wrong on this. And from an operations stance or from a CISO stance. One thing that we kind of forget about is a bit of a hidden cost in security. And one thing that we've always kind of dealt with at a business level is, from an ops perspective, you're only as good as your next audit, right? If you don't pass that next PCI audit, or you don't have the information at hand to quickly get through that HIPAA or high trust or whatever it may be, next audit that comes down the pathway, those are not fun timeframes. And getting really good friends with your auditor is kind of critical for this stuff. How is this consolidation operationally, security-wise, going to impact compliance and audit concerns in the years moving forward? Because you may have 3 years, 5 years, 7 years of data sitting over in, let's say it's QRadar on-prem, and now you're having to look at moving to a Cortex style offering or an XOR style offering that has to go through a translation process. Is this problematic from an operations perspective or from a security standpoint, or are there things that we could look at that would help mitigate that?
Trey, I'm going to let you start.
You want me to start? All right. So I'll step out of my lane into John's for 1 second. So when we're looking at response capabilities, we're looking at a time frame of hours to days to weeks, right? Our ability to identify high signal indicators that's a currency request, and that speaks to what your current platforming capabilities, what your enrichment, what your analyst workflows, and what your ability to action and respond looks like. When we start looking out to the longer horizon, I think one of the hidden costs is data portability. So whether you want to consolidate historical data, to your point, back into the platform where you can do those searches, when you're an integrator, so looking back to my time at Heroku, when you start looking at your superscalers that you're working with, do they have the ability to go way back? When you're looking at account compromises, ATO type of patterns, these aren't days and weeks, these are months and years. And so when you start looking at really deep cold storage, you're looking at very expensive queries, and these queries can cost into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's not something simply done by any platform. And so summary indexing and data architecture and hierarchy is huge, but that gets into your original design. From a compliance and age standpoint, depending on your vertical, you may have to have some of that data back 7 years. And so thinking about what your retention contract looks like, do you have the ability to move that? Do you have the ability to query back into it if you need to? And what does it cost when it comes time to do that? Those are hidden complexities that I think you have to game out when you're evaluating each of these solutions. One of the biggest bets you're going to make as a CISO is your SIEM, your ops, and then your ability to go back into that. And so if you fire your SIEM or MDR vendor, can you bring that data along? Will you have the ability to interact with it? You've got to game all those scenarios out. John?
Yeah, no, and I think you hit it on extremely well. And I think, for the longest time, if we kind of, rewind the tapes, the real cost for a lot of folks that wanted to invest in SIEM was that, it was one for one. As my data, as my number of tools expanded, if what I wanted to observe expanded, so did my cost, right? It was always linear or at least exponential. And it caused, and it continues today to cause a lot of hard decisions that CISOs need to make around what am I observing? What am I actually logging? How hot does that storage need to be? How long do I need to retain it? And to your point, Trey, there are certain industries that require and force you from a compliance perspective to keep it. So you're not going to be able to escape those. So you're beholden to those regulators. But so many CISOs today are like, look, I need that visibility. If you picture a house, it's like, I have to pick which room in my house I'm not going to have a sensor or camera in, that I've basically got to, leave these blind spots, and the adversaries know, right? That's a backdoor, that's an entry point. And, with any market consolidation, I think generally people sit there and go, look, there's, less pricing power that I have as a consumer because I have less optionality, right? So that's I think a general concern, but we're not seeing that. In fact, there's such an aggressive land grab for those SIEM spend and those SIEM dollars that I think we're seeing a lot of vendors in that space get really creative and aggressive in terms of how they price and how they incentivize you to adopt their platform. But I do think that the hidden cost really is, I think, either vendor lock-in, is, hey, I'm going to be stuck with, because no one's going to want to switch SIEMs every year, right? Like, so, making that migration and doing it once and choosing the right partner is key. So that's a huge hidden cost that people need to evaluate. But also, where am I going to have, visibility going forward? How is that going to scale? And how can I optimize my spend to give me the outcomes I want? And I think that's where, you've seen the market, and specifically a lot of customers speak to a lot of allergies to some of the pricing models that have been out there around, hey, I'm tired of having to pick and choose, right? Like, my attack surface has grown, my data volume has grown. I hate having to pick and choose. It's a level of frustration and a level of risk. And, talking to my CISO here, it's a level of risk that I don't feel like, I want to accept.
I think we're also making a gross assumption. We're waving a magic wand for a market segment where everyone has only one SIEM. And for highly acquisitive organizations, especially coming into the private equity populace or some of the really large acquisitive organizations, you're now locked into multi-year contracts with a variety of SIEM options, and the ability for you to go interact with that data, normalize that data, query across those different data stores. This is a non-trivial problem set.
I think how do I want to put this? we've kind of rolled back into a point that Bill made, that I think both of you also kind of hit on, that I wanted to get kind of the group opinions on as well, is that 29% don't expect to spend any less moving forward, right? To your point, Trey, we have, whether it's some even small organizations may have multiple SIEMs because they have multiple use cases. They may have had multiple engineers that have come in and they just left the data there because of some compliance requirements that are out there. But we also have, John, to what you were talking about, there is a bit of this technical lock-in that can happen, right? As we see this large consolidation starting to occur, and the platforming of data, or the hyperscaler component of data, on saying, well, I've got your data because you're mostly here, so I can offer you some cost savings, supposedly, but I'm really more building a fence, or I'm trying to walk through and say, hey, this data's here, leave it here. Don't worry about any of the other stuff, or deal with that on the other side. Like, do we expect customers to have enough capabilities, or enough, I don't want to say forethought, but to take some of that data flexibility and data portability questions into account as part of their initial designs and architectures, to get ahead of the hyperscalers kind of forcing some of this? Or do we expect the hyperscalers and others to do what's right, and to be a little bit more open, mostly because market forces will require them to? And if that's an unfair question,
did you just ask if a capitalistic run organization was going to do the right thing versus doing what's profitable for them? Is that what I just heard, Neil? Was that the question?
I said market forces may require them to do so I'm still abiding by the law of capitalism.
Listen, I don't care about commoditization. What I'm really proud of is my open source, my Elk stack. I like my OSS sec. I like my Suricata install. I've got Security Onion running. I've got a couple really smart people that are saving me a lot of money. As it turns out, if you start at the other end of the spectrum and focus on outcomes, what do we care about? Do I have all the right telemetry? Am I confident I'm managing back pressure? Am I confident the right things are flowing? Am I confident that the right things are being identified and actioned? If I focus on the outcomes so I can sleep at night and I can serve the business and be responsive, commoditization is a tremendous force. And I think it's something we all need to respond to and acknowledge. I think politically we have a harder time partnering, not with the security people, but with the SRE, the service reliability engineering, the production engineering partners over in operations and engineering, more so than we do within the security space. And so partnering with them, I think most of the customers I talk to, most of the prospects, the market out there, when I talk to them, well, we don't just use our SIEM for security, it's for operations. We're like, yes, like this is one defect in failure mode. And so partnering with the CIO, the head of engineering, the CTOs, this is the conversation we need to have. And the answer will be commoditization more times than it won't. That's just one guy's opinion. John, do you have thoughts on the market forces there?
Look, the market forces, I think what we will see and what we're seeing play out today is that a lot of these larger platforms want to say, if you have our native tools on top of our data platform, we want to make that obviously very enticing, right? From a cost perspective. We believe that there are synergies in terms of what you ingest, how you ingest. We see that in Microsoft. We see that in CrowdStrike today. And eventually we're going to see that a lot with Palo, right? We're going to say it's not going to be the same cost per gig or the same workload pricing for our native tool set versus, integrations with third-party tools. So I think the markets will actually drive CISOs and CIOs to make decisions on that multi-SIEM environment, because they're like, look, I'm going to continue to port things, into these environments where I get a lot of optimization in my spend and I get complete visibility, but it's going to require that horizontal layer, right? It's going to require, someone that can see across those environments. And this is not to make a, overly big, Deepwatch plug, but, being that horizontal layer, understanding where your detections can be optimized inside of those environments and how we can leverage both telemetry, correlation, and our own AI secret sauce to say, this is what we are able to observe and correlate across all of those environments, whether we're pulling the data up or doing federated search within those environments or within those tools to basically say, we can optimize your detection strategy as well, right? As you look at optimizing your spend inside of those environments, we can optimize and adhere to those strategies to make sure that you're getting that same level of coverage and reducing that noise.
I'm going to add one thing on that, and I think it's important for us to kind of point out here, which is part of this is when we talk about the consolidation, we talk about some of the platforms that are occurring or the hyperscaler components. Like I personally don't feel I think what Trey's pointing out, what John's talking about, and what Bill's talking about, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I had a conversation with an analyst the other day, and we were kind of joking back and forth about having a company run their own product or manage their own product, or some of the lock-in capabilities that can occur technically within these larger components or larger, we'll call them conglomerates, maybe a better way of putting it. Right? And the joke that we were passing back and forth is, as former SEs, one of the favorite things that we would have is when we go back with our technology to our product managers and say, hey, I found this, what's going on? The product manager or someone in development going, well, it's not supposed to do that. Well, it did. Like that was what we figured out a way to make it do that. Like at one point in time, I might have been involved with making a virtual IDS into an IPS, which wasn't supposed to happen, but we figured it out. So the point off of this that I'd like to make is a lot of these technology capabilities are really good at their tech, and they can do a lot of detections, a lot of enrichment, a lot of visibility, more so than anyone else is going to get within their area or within their bailiwick. But sometimes, to kind of quote John saying, being able to up level some of that on, it's not how it works, it's how it should be used or how it can be used best is kind of the point that I personally think CISOs need to be talking about or thinking about as they look at these different platforms, as they look at where the future may be going. Let's figure out how to use these in the best way, and what are the right spices or pieces of the recipe versus, hey, this is where I'm going to just work within here. Know that you may need to look around a little bit more, and have someone that you can partner with or consult at that higher level to be your coach on that's a use for it, but it's not the right use for it. Bill, is that fair, or am I prophetizing too much?
Well, I mean, I think there's some of this comes all the way back to the hand-wringing over vendor lock-in. Guess what? You're going to have vendor lock-in no matter what you do. Whether it's vendor lock-in through M&A, you just bought a company that has a dissimilar set of technology, and the contract on that is, for the next 3 years, or even if the contract isn't, you're going to have so much to do that you're not going to replace it all with corporate standard in the next 3 months. You're going to deal with that. And some of these technologies and company sizes and stuff, the replacement process for firewalls, as an example, can even be a multi-year process. So you're going to have vendor lock-in no matter what. Neil, I think your point about what can you do with the technology is very important. And I think that does harken back to the hyperscale capabilities as the ability to get the most out of those while you're planning for your next thing. But some of these tools and just the size of organizations, right? I've been in companies where we planned to replace something that, depending upon the size of the company, you might think is trivial, and we couldn't get out of the planning stage in 6 months. So I think we're hand-wringing over vendor lock-in as it sounds like a problem with these new stacks of complete security operations technology and stuff. I think we're overblowing that a bit. It's been a problem forever. It's been a reality forever. How are we enabling companies and prospects to utilize what they've got? And I think that really was your point more than anything else, because it just even if you decide, you wake up tomorrow and you decide, I'm going to pick vendor X and just replace everything in my stack with their product. That's great. That's maybe an EDR tool. That's an identity tool. That's an endpoint tool. That's a remote access tool. Those are all individual projects in most any IT department I've ever seen, with 2 project managers and, maybe a couple of summer interns to help speed it along a couple of months every year. This is just reality. And I think, I think the great thing is, for a brand new company, great, you can pick a stack and run with it. For a company who's willing to say, we're going to put the effort into simplifying down to a single stack, I think that's awesome as well. I think that the entire industry can't turn on a dime and suddenly run those stacks in the next 6, 12, even 24 months, but they're wanting to get there, right? We're seeing that the customers want to do it. We're seeing that the suppliers want to be the stack that does that for them. Everybody wants to do this. So it really comes down to who's going to make it work. How is it going to have the least amount of friction, I think, for those operators at whatever level, whether they're Fortune 500 or whether they're, Dan's 5 restaurants.
Does Dan have 6? I'm just like, what are those restaurants? I just want to know.
Dan's Corner Bistro, Dan's Mid Street Bistro.
I think it's fair. I think it's a really fair call out. There's always a changing cost, right? I mean, to be pointed, changing your email provider, changing your office productivity, changing your line of business management, all of these things come with a switching cost. I think one of the things that's most exciting about the SIEM and the monitoring telemetry stack is all the instrumentation, all the build out it takes for the custom alerts. What it takes to know if your application stack is performant, if memory leak uptime, login times, query times, all the things that power the rest of your online enterprise, regardless of the vertical you're in. These have really high soft costs. And so understanding your portability, understanding what those changing costs are, understanding what the training costs are, there's a lot of moving pieces here. And what we want to do is be responsive and resilient against any of those transitions and focus on, again, I'm going to point back towards those business outcomes. That's what the business is ultimately going to care about. That'd be my argument there.
And to kind of move us forward a little bit, because I think we're hitting on a point that we want to move to next, is, again, this, as much as we want to talk about things from a CISO level perspective or from an overarching security practitioner perspective, these decisions come down to business decisions, is what's happening more so than anything else. And looking at what the business is asking for from a buy down perspective for a larger hyperscaler based contract, or what they're looking at from another form of a enterprise license agreement that's occurred. Like the goal we want people to be able to talk about, and Trey, you hit on it, is 1, the outcomes, and 2, the business and the data portability and ownership, so that you can be flexibly prepared for moving forward. And with that kind of flexibility question, the thing I want to ask John, Trey, and Bill to come back on is, we've seen a lot of activity, mostly around the SIEM space, which we've spent a good bit of time talking about. Are there others that we can expect to see? Like we saw the LaceWorks acquisition by Fortinet. Do you see any other particular technologies, or can you think of other technologies in the space that are ripe for consolidation as well?
Neil, I think our industry, cybersecurity in general, one of my favorite things to do. I had a sales leader one time as we were walking into the RSA conference, who reminded me, he said, "Bill, take a look around and categorize everybody into one of 3 categories: a feature pretending to be a product pretending to be a solution, and a solution that's about to buy the feature of the product." That is cybersecurity, has been for forever and ever and ever. So I feel like what you're asking me to answer with, Neil, is, can you pick a particular straw from the haystack that is somehow representative of only part of the haystack? And no, I think they're all out there. They're all ripe for this. Not counting technologies that have maybe seen their day in the sun and are being sunset. I mean, I don't know too many people who have physical tokens with 6-digit numbers on them anymore that rotate through every minute. We tend to have replaced those with software, right? Some of those sorts of things are just off the table. But I think just about anybody in cybersecurity right now, especially as we came out of COVID, as a lot of the investment community changed from being really focused on growth companies to profitability companies, I think this was just the tip of the iceberg. And I think the next 2 years, we're going to see a ton more.
Yeah, I think, valuations, and this certainly didn't stop, obviously, the LaceWorks Fortinet acquisition, but there was a lot of funding that went into cyber over the throughout COVID, right? We've seen a ton of mega rounds And I think a lot of strategic acquirers, a lot of PE firms are still very interested in seeing consolidation in the space. There are a lot of great, to Bill's point, there are a lot of great feature-esque companies. And, if you look at exposure management, attack surface management, I mean, I love a lot of those companies, but were they ever going to be the platform, right? Or was it going to be a feature of a greater platform, right? And your litmus test for that is always, well, is Splunk, is Microsoft, is someone else going to start building that out of their portfolio? Is 6 weeks from now, once they start realizing they're losing sales or they're seeing someone gain traction in this space, they'll say, wait, that's a nice adjacency for us. We already have that data. We already are able to, perform that analysis. Why don't we build that feature set within our core platform? So I do think that you're going to continue to see that, buy versus build analysis from a lot of these companies, because, buying is always going to be a willingness to pay, right? What can you actually pick up some of these assets for in cybersecurity? Coming off of this major wave of, high flying valuations and tons of capital flowing into these businesses, I think will be one of, but not the main gating item in terms of, seeing some of that activity pick up. And we could see it pick up, in the second half. It's always that question of where is market demand, where is customer demand in terms of, buying the solutions. And like any good acquirer, you're going to ask yourself, what's the force multiplier inside of my organization? How can I take what I'm acquiring and sell it to all of my existing install base of customers? Or how can I acquire those customers and sell everything on my truck to those customers, right? It's all about, cross-sell and those synergies. And then just, am I getting a force multiplier in my R&D spend? Am I getting a force multiplier in go-to-market? Am I entering new markets, et cetera? So I do think we'll see consolidation. We've always joked, and I think we'll see, consolidation in MDR. I think we'll see consolidation in, continued consolidation in a lot of the point solutions out there. I think it's just a matter of where are the funding markets, where are the debt markets, where are the, the equity markets that are going to go back some of those transactions for those that need capital to go pull the trigger.
Go ahead, Trey. Sorry, come up.
I don't know. I was just going to laugh. If you look back at historical, I think 10 or 15 years ago, like McAfee and their endpoint crusade of all the things that they were doing, they had the firewall solution, the USB management solution, the antivirus solution, the DLP solution. They had all these things that were folding in. Symantec Enterprise had their response to all this. And, we had the hard conversation at the CISO tier on, do I want the best of breed for a specific thing that I'm really prioritizing and indexing on? Or do I want the synergistic solution that is good enough but cohesive at a lower price point? And so when we start looking at these things, the attack surface management and the surface mapping concept, we had this solved in vulnerability management, except we didn't. Then we moved to the cloud and we had no idea what we had. And so now the whole question of, holy cow, then there's the operational security consideration of, gosh, I now have certificates mapped for some of these development environments that are clearly signaling for those paying attention. I have a relationship or a joint development venture with these 3 companies. And so there's a whole lot for those paying attention that these relationships are there and not everyone was paying attention. So I think John articulated the economic reality very well. Christensen's disruptive innovation concept of where are the segments being torn, where are the inactive buyers, where are the environments that, to Bill's point, we can fold in an acquisition, fold in a specific go-to-market segment, or shore up a gap. I think those solutions providers, there's going to be a lot of room for that consolidation.
I mean, I think to all the points, right? It is, especially to what you were just saying, Trey, like, we've seen this before, right? This is all cyclical, and we've seen these activities happen. And there are some slight differences this time around kind of data locale, kind of data ownership due to the cloud capabilities now and the dispersal of assets and asset types and other types of pieces of data. But overall, it will always come down to the business nature of, is it something that can be folded in, and what you were talking about on the build versus buy comparison, right? If we have the data, we're just going to go ahead and use that. Or can I I'm already halfway there. It's a small step to get to the next piece, kind of like what you've seen from a bit of the DLP to the UEBA style activities, right? I've got a lot of information of what people are touching. Just going to map that stuff out, right? So it's always a kind of a constant moving dance associated to that.
Well, again, to your point, Neil, we've and what's been said on this webcast is that, look, we've seen this movie before. Like when you see consolidation like this, and I do think that the market is ripe for this level of consolidation. I think over time you just see companies that just fall stale, right? Like once you become a jack of all trades, you become a master of none, right? And that's when, and because, security architectures, try and keep up with, adversarial, TTPs, right? Like we're constantly, those don't necessarily evolve, but the methods and the tools used to actually penetrate environments does evolve, right? So leveraging quantum computing, leveraging AI, right? How is that going to evolve? And how are these platforms or these consolidators going to keep up with those that, receive funding and are building that better mousetrap? That's why there are over 4,000, vendors in the cybersecurity space, right? That's why it's so vast, is because the level of innovation and the level of sophistication that the adversaries move requires that level of innovation, at the product level, right? At the innovation level. That's what's so exciting about this industry, is that I think you're going to, it'll be a tale as old as time. You'll see just these waves of consolidation, and then we'll see ourselves maybe in another 2 years, maybe in another 4 or 5, of someone saying, look, I got my tool set down to 20, but hey, what's protecting me from, what's protecting my LLMs, right? Like what's protecting these components of my overall IT landscape where I clearly have gaps, either total gaps or just functionality gaps from, the consolidators or those single platforms that I've consolidated down to.
So we're running short on time here, and I wanted to kind of summarize this a little bit real quick on to what John's just saying. Like this is waves, right? We've seen this happen. It just happened to be in for Deepwatch and for others in the security space. SIEM's been a very important component of our architecture for a very long time, and so it was a natural movement. Like we've always kind of talked about. For example, Splunk being acquired by Cisco, that's certainly not a new rumor that none of us have heard about over the last half a decade or so, right? So these things were going to happen, and the advance will continue forward. Like they're going to continue to move things forward. We're going to continue to look at net new technologies and new ways of dealing with age-old attacks and the standard get access, do evil, or get access, move lateral, get something valuable, and then maybe do evil, right? Depends upon what they want to look at. But the thing that I want everyone to kind of take out of this, and I think we'll probably do as one of our next conversations, so I do think this is incredibly valuable for the market and not just from a Deepwatch perspective. One is really need to start talking about and really think about data ownership and data portability. Right? We mentioned it in an old podcast a while back. Trey, I think you might have been on it, where it was the question of, if you can't move it, do you own it? If you can't use it later on, do you actually own it, or was it ever portable in the first place? And again, that question becomes very central around the SIEM consolidation, SIEM capabilities aspects. And the second one was actually something I heard from one of our analyst friends that I think John and Trey, you guys have really kind of beat on it a little bit more than you think you have, which is the business aspects of security. And being able to talk about intelligently to other members of your organization from a CISO's seat or from a security executive seat of what's the impact to the business, whether it's from a financial perspective, whether it's from a risk perspective, or whether it's from an operational perspective. That is a skill that I don't know that a lot of us actually have, and because we're more used to talking about the bits and bytes and how they got access to this, and I ran Kali Linux, like yay. That's not working for the business themselves, and so I think we may do a little bit more around that at a later date, and kind of start talking about things from a business perspective for security. But other than that, again, I really appreciate y'all's time and attention. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was impactful. If you have questions, again, specifically for us, not just about Deepwatch, but for other things that we may have said or problems that we may have caused and things that we said on this one, we apologize. But reach out to us. Hit us up on LinkedIn. We're all on there. Or hit us up at Deepwatch. And hope you all have a pleasant day or pleasant evening. I appreciate your time and your attention. Thank you very much.